It's August the 17th, 2022, and we're looking today at Psalm 13. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, I've overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. Amen. I was walking down the road the other day with a dear friend, someone who I've always regarded, and rightly so, as a good, faithful Christian. I was also aware that he was going through a major trial in his life. It's one of the reasons why we were meeting up. In the course of that conversation, we weren't actually saying that much to each other. But in the course of that walk and that talk, he said to me, Keith, I feel so disappointed. I feel that God has let me down. Now, do you think it's okay to speak like that? You could say, well, it was what he was thinking. He was just being honest, wasn't he? Yes. But I think the problem was he was being honest to the wrong person. He should have been talking to God about it. As does David here in this psalm. That's why these psalms are here, for times like that. They help us. Maybe we don't know how to pray. We try to pray. We feel incoherent, and just it's like someone's gripping us by the throat and nothing's coming out. Well, then we can read a psalm like this, beginning as it does, with a desperate plea. That's how it begins. Verses 1 and 2. How long? How long? How long? How long? 4 times. It shows how David is struggling with God. Verse 1. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? Then, secondly, he's struggling not only spiritually, that's the spiritual agony he's going through, also psychologically. It's affecting his mind. Verse 2. How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? And the source of it all seems to be that he is struggling socially. How long will my enemy triumph over me? We haven't heard this for a little while, but we know in these early Psalms there's a lot about David's enemies. And we saw in the background the stories about Absalom, the stories about Saul. You just read the historical parts of David's life recorded in the Old Testament, and it brings this to life, doesn't it? The many enemies that he had. He was crying out to God to deal with them, and it seems that the Lord isn't dealing with them. And David has these strong and negative feelings, some of them against God himself. And what's he doing? He's taking those thoughts, he's taking those feelings, he's taking those struggles to the only one who can do anything about it. Ultimately, to God himself. So he brings his desperate plea, and he outlines again his desperate need. Verses 3 and 4. Because without the life-giving light from God piercing into this dark place, then this darkness, the darkness of death, sleeping in death, will overcome him. That's what it feels like. That's what he fears. And again, why? Because of my enemy, verse 4, my foes. It seems by this point there's an army of them who are breathing down his neck. We sometimes might feel like that as well. Not literally, I don't suppose, but certainly you can feel as if there's a swarming army of enemies and problems and troubles and trials and afflictions, and they keep gathering and they keep pouring down upon us. We can feel like that sometimes. But, verses 5 and 6, but the psalm resolves now, and maybe the trial resolves now. There's a sort of positive answer we find at the end. So that means that the trial has been dealt with. The trial's been taken away, has it? Well, there's nothing to indicate that. He's certainly asking God to step in, as he did in the previous psalm. Do you remember in Psalm 12, verse 3, may the Lord cut off all flattering lips and every boastful tongue. It's not wrong to pray like that. And there are times when God might indeed answer that prayer, but there's nothing here that specifically tells us that. Though we might live in hope and pray to that end. But the trial, though the trial doesn't go away, there is a resolution here which comes because he's been talking to God. He's been talking to the Lord. He's been coming to him and pouring out his soul to him in this way. And the resolution which ends the psalm is that the troubled man that we find at the beginning, whose soul is all jarred and anxious and bitter and eaten up, the troubled man changes into the trusting man. What a contrast. Rejoicing, singing, remembering, and delighting in the love, the goodness, the salvation, the unfailing love of the Lord. Verses 5 and 6, I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. Is it wrong to feel angry, disappointed, depressed? Even as a believer, this man, obviously King David is, even as a believer with many, many negative feelings that we struggle with, even against God. The key thing is when you have them, what do you do with them? And like the psalmist, the greatest thing we can do, there might be other things we can do to help ourselves. We might talk to a friend. Sometimes we need counseling, maybe sometimes even medication, and so on and so on. There's a range of things that might be helpful, though we've got to be very careful with those things, because the main thing, the most important thing a believer has to do when we think like that, we feel like that, we are in that situation, like David in this psalm, the main thing is to take it to the Lord in prayer.